Welcome, everyone. I'm Lauren Hawkins. Thanks for tuning in with us to Spirituality Adventures. We are so glad you're here, and we're very excited about the content we get to share with you through our blogs and podcasts. Spirituality Adventures is made possible by your support. One way you can support us is by liking, following, subscribing, or sharing any of these podcasts or blogs that you like. Another way you can support us is by going to our website, www.spiritualityadventures.com. There you can click the support tab and you can sign up for a monthly subscription or a one-time gift. We appreciate all your support. Now here's Fred.
Welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality. And we are so excited to have Calvin Arsenia back as our guest. Thank you, Calvin, for joining us for a second session on Spirituality Adventures.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So I've thoroughly enjoyed every conversation I've had with you and hope to have many, many more. But in this particular podcast, I would like to get into your musical career and maybe start by just telling us, like, when do you first remember like singing or playing an instrument, and like, did you grow up in a musical family and stuff like that?
Wow. Music, I never knew that people weren't musical. I never knew that until later. I never realized that, because I was singing since I was probably like 16. Since I was 6. I remember writing songs about the world around me, and I loved to sing in the bathroom, as everyone does. But I would just spend hours in the bathroom as, somebody 5-6 years old, just like making up songs and experimenting with my voice. And I remember that this is somewhat embarrassing, but Calvin means bald and comes from the French word chauve, which I believe it developed from John Calvin himself, and that he was the first Calvin, and then everyone else was named after him subsequently, and I was named after my mother's grandfather, the Calvin part, and Arsenia is my father's grandfather's name, and my little brother, his name is Reuben, which means behold the sun, and I wrote this whole epic song about how he got the better name.
Oh, wow.
At 6 years old.
Wow.
And I remember very specifically this song because it was very heart-wrenching.
Oh, wow. So it started young.
It started young. And so, but my first show that I presented with my music was actually on Good Friday in the year 2010. And I recorded an EP, several songs. Basically, the set list I was planning to do that night, I recorded in my friend's shower, and and I did it at the Starbucks down the street from my parents' house, and presented these songs with a band that had never really rehearsed entirely, and I painted illustrations of each of the songs I was going to do, like some of the imagery of those songs. I painted illustrations of those songs and built these topiary sculptures out of fabric and wood, like frames. And then I sewed the paintings onto these fabric topiaries. And so people could go up and look at the background. That was the backdrop of the set at Starbucks. And I only used those paintings once. I only used those topiaries once, and they were like a 2x4 stuck in cement, and then like a green fabric frame, kind of like a rectangular shape that kind of looked like a topiary in a pot. And my dad eventually threw them away.
Oh, wow.
But
was this a Starbucks down in Olathe, or?
Yeah, the one off of 151st and Black Bob.
Wow.
Yeah, they had recently opened, never had music before that, never had music since, as far as I know.
Interesting. Was this after, this was after your career in worship leading?
I mean, it was in the middle of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was in the middle of it. And a lot of my songs were very much about God and trying to stay on the straight and narrow, and no puns intended. And just dealing with the qualms of my own heart, and being frustrated that I could not reach this perfection that I felt I owed it to God, and that I owed it to myself, and that I owed it to my community, and being frustrated with the nuance of being human.
Mm-hmm. Were any of your family members musical? Like, did you grow up around music or instruments or singing or anything like that?
My mom grew up in choirs and singing. She took piano lessons as a young person, and my dad really loved music, and they both played music around the house a lot, but neither of them are professional musicians.
Okay.
And my older brother, who is 7 years older than me, a little bit like an older cousin or like an uncle in the family kind of dynamic, because we were just never like super close growing up, and he was in show choirs, and so we would go and see him perform in his show choirs, and he was also in band and played trumpet, and so there's music always around, and like there was never this feeling like, oh, you can't do that because it's hard, or like there was just never that feeling. And although, my parents, like every human, are not perfect, what they were really, really good at with me was never shooting down my ideas, and never saying, oh, you can't do that. They weren't always like super like, yeah, go get it, and we'll support you every step of the way. They weren't those people either, but they were just like, if you're going to do it with excellence. And so they kind of released me to my own devices. And luckily, for the most part, those have been really good things.
Awesome. So was the church the first place that you performed? Was that really kind of the first place?
Yeah, and it was I don't even know how it happened. I was in a children's choir, and at the age of 12, there was a musical by the name of The Promise that came. It was like a pageant play that came from Branson to the church that I was going to, and they were doing a week long of shows. They were needing a whole bunch of people from the church to be part of that. So I think actually this children's choir developed as a part of that. They formed it so that there would be a children's choir to open this show, and so there were, I don't know, 7 shows in a week or something like that, and they asked me to do the solo for this little light of mine. And so I sang this kind of funny, jazzy, soulful solo, and I'm pretty sure that was the first time I ever sang like in front of anybody on stage, and I was very shy and kind of didn't understand why people were having me sing. Like, it was just like, everyone sings. like everyone sings. This is not extraordinary. You sing, we all sing. We have voices, people sing. And then my friend, oh, sorry, not my friend, so sorry, my cousin asked me to sing at her wedding, which was the prayer by that has been done by Andre Bocelli and Josh Groban. And so that's probably the first time that I took singing really seriously. The director of that children's choir gave me a Josh Groban album and said, I think you'll like this. And so I became kind of obsessed with like classical singing and classical technique. And then I ended up singing that song at a wedding at 12 years old in perfect Italian, or at least as perfect as I could get it. My mom hooked me up with an Italian teacher, like a native speaker from Italy, and we went through the song, like each word, line by line, at 12 years old, and I sang this song.
Wow!
And studied, like worked really, really hard to make sure that it was perfect, and so yeah, those are some of my like formative experiences with with performance. And then after that, somebody kind of like charged me with a guitar. Like they gave me a guitar to loan, and it was like a friend of mine in middle school. She loves country music, and I hated country music, but her dad got her an acoustic guitar for Christmas, and by the time February came around, she had already given up learning how to play and said, Calvin, you're really musical. Why don't you borrow my guitar? And then once you figure out how to play it, teach me how to play. And so I was like, okay. And by the time June of that year came around, so this was the year following, I was 13 then. By the time June came around, I was already playing for Bible studies and kind of on a regular basis, right, playing for things that were kind of auxiliary to church experiences.
Yeah. So it's so fascinating to me to, just as I've followed musicians and songwriters from all over the world, actually, so many of them got their start in churches. It's just a place to showcase kids and their talents and all these different performances, whether it's Christmas or Easter or any number of places. So it's really has been a birthplace for so much music. And in the African American community, even your hip hop artists, and most of them started in church. It's interesting stuff. So,
and it's like, yeah. It's a community, and I think sometimes we forget that that's like the first part, is that it's the people gathering, yes, and all those individuals, and besides all the baggage that comes after that, there is that community aspect. So,
it's one of the cool things that I think has come out of the church community around the world is music and birthplace for that stuff. Well, your training was interesting to me. It's not like you took a super formal route, but you've trained with some amazing people. If I understand right, you've done classical voice training with a wonderful teacher. You're known for your harp playing, but you also do guitar and keyboards and I talk a little bit about your training, and especially maybe in classical singing and the harp. That really fascinated me because there's such a small community worldwide, it sounds like, that know the harp like you know it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Share a little bit about
classical singing,
the harp especially, and classical singing too.
For sure. So I'll just, cursory about the classical singing. I was in choirs and stuff in high school. And my senior year of high school, I was in 4 choirs at school. And I just loved the feeling that you get when you're singing a cappella and harmony. And that kind of got me into a little bit of trouble, like as a singer outside of that context, because I was kind of a choir boy. And a lot of the people who were doing music in the scene, so to speak, were more punk rock or rock and roll or indie, and kind of had these soft, wispy, very conversational voices. And so for me to come out of the gate with an acoustic guitar and super lofty and singing and belting these notes and singing super high and super low and really playing with the voice, thinking of it as an instrument more than a device for words, it kind of set me aside, and I felt like an outsider a lot of the time in those communities. And it's probably around that, accepting that feeling of being an outsider and accepting that feeling of I'm just the people that I admire, both on a world scale, like people whose work I'm a fan of, and the people who I admire in my personal life, both have the same thing in common, where they have allowed themselves to be themselves in whatever weird ways that are their weird ways. And that if I'm to learn anything from their experiences, that I need to just be myself, and then we'll deal with it. And rather than trying to aspire or fashion myself after these other people in the ways that they are specifically themselves, that if I just be myself, then everything will be okay. And that's been the lifelong hypothesis, is if I just settle down, figure out what I want to do, figure out what I like, figure out how I want to do it, then I'm pretty sure things will go great.
It's
And so,
and so many things in life. It's like getting comfortable with your own skin and who you are, and
Yeah.
even in pastoring, I would have people that I, would look like, I think about, I wish I could be like them or this person or that,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'd try maybe at times to be like somebody else, and then it just wouldn't work.
Right.
And it's like,
right.
okay, I gotta be myself. It's
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a journey. It's like I'm still on that journey. It's really interesting.
And yes, and then the harp came about because I was obsessed with artists like Joanna Newsom and Björk, and Florence and the Machine was very popular around this time.
Yeah.
Around the time right after that Starbucks show, I started trying to collaborate with other musicians, and I was like, well, my vision for my work is very orchestral and very like cinematic and theatrical, and how do I build this sound? I often had female like a vocal accompaniment with me, like people singing harmonies and stuff, which is also very common in a worship band situation. And so I had, these amazing singers I was singing with, doing harmonies with, and I had guitar players and bass players and some drummers in my life at that time, but I didn't have any harp players. And so I went on a hunt around Kansas City to find a young, vibrant harpist that wanted to experiment and just jam and didn't require too much rehearsal. And at that time, I wasn't able to really score for harp yet. So they would have to be able to write their own parts and come, be at all the shows and just like fit into, the little thing I was creating, which was a lot of improvisation. And I found some very talented and beautiful spirits and individuals. But I also needed them to do all of this for free. And so, although I met awesome harpists in town, nobody quite fit exactly what I needed. So I decided to rent a harp from a local harp studio, which, yes, we have that in Kansas City, a woman who had multiple harps and taught from her home. And I couldn't afford to take lessons, but I could afford to rent the harp. And so I rented the harp, borrowed my boss's car. At the time, by the way, I was working as like an estimator for a construction subcontractor. So I borrowed my boss's Suburban to go pick up the harp because I wasn't sure if my car was going to fit it. And it was a Celtic harp, which is a smaller version. The full size of a Celtic harp is smaller than the classical harp. And so it did fit in my car. But anyway, the point is I made it this whole to-do. I went and picked up the harp, and the woman, very typical harp player. She was middle-aged woman, kind of small, lady, and I just didn't want to intimidate her, or for her to not trust me, because I was like, I promise I'll take care of it. Like, I actually want to play. I'm actually going to learn. I'll pay every month and all the things. And much to her chagrin, I remember driving off with that harp, and that was the beginning of the rest of the story, I think.
And it's an elite group worldwide that or I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but just not
exclusive would be maybe the word I would use.
Okay.
Just because, but there is some elitism in it too, and that makes it very complicated, because if you think about the generational circumstances that must allow for one to even touch a harp,
right? It's expensive, right?
They're very expensive. They're very awkward to move around. They're not that easy to play. They're very hard to keep in tune. The maintenance alone is quite a burden. Some harps you could buy a house with, like literally sell the harp, buy a house, cash, full out. Wow. Mine is not quite that expensive, or at least depends on the house. But I got this harp last year at the onset of the pandemic as a result of multiple people donating and supporting to make that happen. And prior to that, I did not own a harp. I had been playing ones that I'd borrowed or leased, and I started playing harp at 20 years old. I was not a kid. and it wasn't something that my parents manifested for me, and that's not a problem either. But the general story of harpists tends to be that they wanted to play as a young child. They started on piano because that's what harp teachers always tell them to do. They started on piano, and by some means of a trust fund or some other like financial device, they were able to buy the instrument, and then they tend to be classical based, only playing classical music. They tend to not really do much improvisation. They tend to not really write that much. They're more like contractors, and a lot of them become artists because of that. The intensity by which they've studied. But classical musicians, I think, approach music in a very specific way. That is like, I need to manifest. I need to showcase the work of the composer and the work of the conductor. And so I will do what it takes to be a part of this mass, this group of people, rather than trying to express their own heart's cry. And so what I do with the harp, there is a community of kind of outlier harpists, a community of people who do maybe started as an adult, maybe made their own way to the instrument in some kind of fashion, and are doing something of their own with it. And a lot of us know each other, I would say, in the world, because we're just so weird and have sought the companionship of one another. But yeah, what I like to make the harp sexy, and to try to kind of, by a living metaphor, use this instrument that's been mostly used to depict angelic behavior, and to kind of call sexuality and heartbreak and dancing and these kinds of other experiences, that they are also holy, just like worship is holy, just like heaven is holy. That the whole experience of being human is worthy of reverence, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do with it now.
Okay, so I was gonna ask, since you brought that topic up, sure. The first time we talked, I think you stated sort of a mission statement of what you try to do in like a live event.
Yeah.
And and it included the word transcendence. I can't remember exactly what it was, but this connection with the sacred and transcendence, and of course this is spirituality adventure, so this obviously intrigues me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I say that I want to curate and create moments of transcendence, and then there are offshoots off of that. But and actually it's funny that you mentioned Sigur Rós earlier, because we were talking about language, and
did I say that on the podcast, or that I don't think so. It was before pre-podcast. Okay. Yeah, so some people might not know that Sigur Rós band from Iceland.
Yes.
Yeah, we chatted about their unique language. They made up a language to do songs. Anyway,
in relation to speaking in tongues, but I remember because in the worship band community, there are musicians like all throughout the town, all throughout Kansas City, that kind of are connected and know each other, and some of them play in alternative Christian bands and stuff like that. So there were like lots of influences in my life, and musicians who were in the worship community that were showing me things. And the conversation about Sigur Rós came up because they had played a show in Kansas City, and people said that they had a really profound experience with it. And at that time, I was not listening to anything that wasn't explicitly worship music. Christian rock didn't count. Like, I had friends that listened to like Reliant K and I don't know, people like that, where it's the people who were considered to be Christians and spoke about their Christianity, but I was like, no, that's not hardcore enough for me. So only music that's like literally like bringing you into the presence of God is what I'm going to listen to.
Yeah.
And so when I heard people describe their experience with Sigur Rós as this like profoundly spiritual experience, that there was weeping and that there was like, that they were just like, I'll never be the same. I was like, okay, that man is not a Christian, and not only is he not a Christian, he's also a homosexual. And if he is able to change how the room feels, and with his voice and with those musicians, it's surely demon fueled. So I'm never going to that. And he must be evil. So never will I listen to Sigur Rós. Fast forward 2 years. Fast forward 2 years later, Jonsi, or maybe about 2 years, Jonsi came back to town on a solo tour with his partner Alex, and did a tour of his album called Go Do, and the same guy who introduced me to the music of Sigur Rós bought me a ticket to go and see this show, and the show had a set. You can look it up online about the tour. It was an opera house, an opera company that had developed this stage setting that was inspired by a burned down taxidermy shop. And so they had all these windows and wood and kind of melted plexiglass and then projections of these animals that were being burned up or had been burned, used and made into animations and projections on all this, the panes and the windows and layers of projection. And so there was this amazing, profound visual experience. This was at Liberty Hall in Lawrence. And then there was the music and the voice and the way that they would build these epic experiences in the music with the kick drum and the strings and the pianos and the effects and the reverbs and the lights and the strobes. And I just remember, my skin's crawling just now even remembering that experience, because it was so profound to me that I was having this experience that was beyond words, that was beyond me sitting and watching a band. I was being lifted out of my skin, and the room was being lifted out of its skin, and then the show was over, and I was silent for about half an hour. I remember I was just shaking my head. I was like, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that I felt the same feeling of being in the presence of God in this scenario. And I guess it just really, it made me think, it made me stop and wonder, maybe there is something to this music thing. And I had been playing music for a long time, but maybe there's something about just sharing. Maybe there's something about the ritual of producing a show. Maybe there's something to theater. Maybe there's something to trying a little bit more than just having an acoustic guitar and a voice. And so I became, just obsessed with recreating that sensation, that feeling of spirit outside of the context of church, and using some of the rituals of lighting and sound that I had learned in going to mega churches, because there was some cinematic or theatrical elements to that experience too. Watching my pastors wearing foundation every Sunday morning, you know what I mean, just so that they don't look like a ghost under the stage lights. And and this is their language, not mine. And having that theatrical element and rehearsals and whatnot. So it wasn't too far removed, but the idea of being at a secular venue, experiencing this moment of transcendence, and thinking about, and the train of thought goes down to people who go to festivals or who go to concerts with their favorite bands, people who one time in their life get to experience this. Right, not every person who goes to concerts or who is at a show gets to do that very often. Oftentimes, it's once, twice, 3 times in a lifetime thing, and they've spent all this money. They've got a babysitter for their kids. They took time off from work. Whatever the sacrifice is, whatever allowed them to be in that room, they have made a sacrifice to be there. And I know that it's my duty and privilege to do something with that sacrifice that would change their life, that should change their life forever and to benefit them. So when I'm producing these shows, it's different when I'm just playing on a corner, and I don't like to do that very often. I do it sometimes, but what I like to do is to create these very elaborate sensory experiences that allow people to feel open to exploring themselves, that they're watching me explore my inner workings, that they're watching me find the edge of myself. And for me, it's like that there's a spiritual practice of like, okay, what is something that I'm afraid to say? There's something that I'm afraid that I'm experiencing. What am I afraid to admit? And a lot of my songs start in that space. A lot of my shows start with that question. And like I had, I don't know if it was it was an interview that you read and you commented on, about, you know, if I will my audience accept me if I am fully myself in front of them? Mm-hmm. And because in my church experience, I knew that was not the case. I watched so many people get witch hunted based on either expressing doubts or something being revealed about themselves that they had been hiding for a long time, and so I knew what the experience was for a congregation to address another human in their midst, someone that they have claimed to know and love. I had seen them burn them at the stake, and so a lot of my, like, you know, it's like preemptive trauma, you know, things that never really happened to me, but I made sure that never happened to me. And so now it's like, okay, I set the rules of the room. I'm trying to see, you know, for instance, if my greatest fear in life was for somebody to think that I was girly, for someone to call me effeminate, or to say that I was limp-wristed, if that, at some point in my life, that was my deepest fear. So what do I do with that? I go on stage wearing a tutu and heels. and I bare my soul. And I say, would you love me if I dressed like this? Do you still love me now? Do I still get to hold on to my humanity if I wear a dress on stage?
Interesting, yeah.
And the answer is yes. So I'm still a human, and all of my feelings are valid, and my experience is valid. And oftentimes I like to change clothes on stage. So it's like, so I'm in something very masculine, and then go to something very feminine, and then I go back, or whatever. You know, I like to show this narrative because it's like, if you accept me this way, then will you accept me this way? Mm-hmm. And will I accept myself this way? Mm. And if you accept me, maybe I can accept me. And there's this play there, you know?
Yeah. It's so brave. And I mean, here I am sitting here at my age, and I certainly still have those thoughts, acceptance, rejection, all those things that run through my brain, you know? And I've been in front of audiences most of my life, you know, for a different reason, speaking and stuff.
Yeah.
But, So Brene Brown wrote a book called Braving the Wilderness that is really about belonging, and really it's about spirituality, as I would define spirituality as connecting with self, others, and something greater than you. She would say maybe like belonging to self, others, and something greater than you. She has a whole chapter on basically this idea of, she calls it hold hands with strangers. And she talks about how there's these community events, either around joy. So it can be a music festival. It could be a soccer game or a football stadium of people who unite in their humanity around something, and then something transcendent happens in that space. Or it can be people uniting in their humanity around pain, maybe at a funeral or something like that, where all the barriers that we have between each other, and all the hatreds, and all the prejudices, and everything that separates us in this world that we live in, all of a sudden melt away into this transcendent moment where we're human and we're connected, and something magical and transcendent happens, and it's sacred, and it connects us to something greater than all of us. Right?
I'm obsessed with that.
It's beautiful.
I'm obsessed with that.
It's beautiful. I'm getting chills talking about it right now.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit, because I want to leave a little bit of time to talk about some of your actual music, and then have you sing a song.
Sure.
But this group called Quixotic, that that you're a part of, or maybe you're a consultant with them or something. That's a group.
I'm a part of the circus. Yeah.
Yeah. But their ideas, these events or these that are fully immersive and multi-sensory experiences.
Yeah.
It sounds, I love the idea of that. And I don't know, in the last talk we did, I talked about baptism meaning immersion. And then I think about this.
Yeah, the dyed fabrics.
Yeah. And then this fully immersive, multi-sensory experience. It's like baptizing people into this sacred, transcendent experience. I don't know, anyway.
Yeah. And this is also coming from something that, it's related. I, for a couple of years recently, like 3 years ago or so, 4 years, I was a teacher at a Montessori school, and just like an adjunct teacher. I taught French and music, and in that pedagogical lineage, they try to use all of the senses as ways to teach, and because everyone has different learning styles, everyone has different ways, gates in which information comes in, and so they teach handwriting by making letters out of sandpaper for the young people to trace with their fingers, and so they practice just the texture and following along with the texture, and that gives their hand the motion and the choreography to eventually pick up a pencil and use it in the way that they know how, like they've been trained to do it, and so I started thinking of my shows in a very different way. And this is something that brought Quixotic and I together as these ideas of immersion, and using how do we address each different kind of learning style in the context of a performance or a ritual. And so there's something to see, something to smell, something to taste, and things to hear. Not everybody goes to a concert to hear music. In fact, a better listening experience is in your car, or like with a stereo system, with a recording. Like the reason why you go to a show is to feel it, and to experience it on every front. And so I tried to make my shows like emotionally profound, but also physically and sensory profound as well.
That's really cool. I love that. So you have an album that came out in 2018 called Cantaloupe, and I want to talk about that song here, and actually spend a little bit of time talking about that. And by the way, I love the way you use metaphors like cantaloupe, like headlight, being caught in a headlight, and then in a relationship, and then are you in or out, and it feels the same. I loved Toxic, and that's so powerful, man. And then your LA Sessions EP that came out in 2019, it kind of was, it had a couple of songs that were new that you did on that EP, but it had some bluesy stuff, some smooth jazz, a little bit of jazz fusion at times, and then your Honeydew was an electronic EP, right? Same year, 2019. So I wanted people to know about your music and how, it's on, how can they access your music? Spotify, Apple Music, your website. Do you have what's your website?
Yeah, it's just calvinarsenia.com.
Okay.
And everything's there. And I just, for me, that feeling of transcendence is everything. And so it doesn't matter genre or methodology. The point is how do we get into that place, like you were talking about, holding hands with strangers? How do we get there? And that can happen despite the genre.
So Cantaloupe, when I first, because I just started listening to your music, and I dive into this Cantaloupe. I listened to it a couple of times, not getting it. I don't know if you're like, because I was thinking about the fruit, right? And I'm going, okay, now how is he using this metaphor of the cantaloupe? And because like you cut a cantaloupe, and you actually in your video Cantaloupe you use the fruit or the melon, right? And you think about
yes.
that metaphor, sometimes for me can be like a womb or, something, something sensual or a birthplace. I don't know. There's all those imageries there. But then that finally dawned on me, oh, wait, he's talking about a wedding and how you don't want to elope because how will we know it's real? We need to have pictures for our kids, and we need to have the whole thing with witnesses, a cloud of witnesses surrounding us. And so then I watched the video Cantaloupe live at the Gym Theater. So for people who aren't from Kansas City, and maybe some people who don't know Kansas City, I'm a huge fan of, the rebirth of 18th and Vine. I've been an active fan of the Blue Room for decades. I've been going there for a long time just to listen to music there. But so the backdrop of the Gym Theater, coupled up with the Marching Cobras band, coupled up with a gay wedding, you're connecting civil rights with gay rights in a wedding with all of these imageries. So many layers to all these imageries as well. So tell people, that is really brilliantly done. But you might tell people, like, a lot of people won't know what the Gym Theater is. And its history in Kansas City. A lot of people won't know the Marching Cobras and its history in Kansas City, and then how you tied that all together into this song about a marriage.
Well, I mean, and I'm definitely not an expert on any of these things. As far as like the history of those of both of those institutions, I know that the Gem Theater is on the east side of town, and so I was a few years ago. I was feeling very moved and called to do something about the redlining of Kansas City, and to do something about black plight in America. And in the last 12 months, that's become even more intense. But before that, I was discovering James Baldwin and particularly his work and his language around racism in America, and finding that super profound, and thinking, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods, going to white churches. And so a lot of this information, even though I had some kind of like, in public schools in America, they talk about, quote unquote, civil rights that began and ended in the 60s. And so and that we're over it now, and don't even look at that anymore. Skip over that chapter, or like, let's parade around the people who were peaceful, and just like, not giving reason why anyone would not be peaceful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or explaining that position. And so, and I wrote about this in a really kind of crass way in my book that's coming out later this year. But the point is that it was very easy to get behind somebody who you're parading for being peaceful. And so at
like
least
Martin Luther King Jr. versus Malcolm X, let's say, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we're pitting these two individuals against each other, when in reality there was a lot of reason to be unrested, to have unrest, and to be very active. And I'm not advocating for violence, but I am saying that something profound needed to happen. And so anyway, so I was thinking, okay, what do I have at my disposal? What can I do? And so what I kind of, as a way to start, I guess, was to have my album release on the east side of town. To have the album release show East of Troost was really important to me. And so I knew of the Gem Theater, and I went and looked at it, and I said, this is going to work. I know that a lot of people who live on the west side, or the more coming from the white neighborhoods, don't hang out over there. You are a rare individual to know that neighborhood, and to have been spending time there as somebody who visits multiple times. Because I think some people visit there as if it's like a resort or like an attraction, and they're not thinking about that as a neighborhood, like as a place to go to, And so, at least that's my experience with it, because a lot of the bars and stuff that I would hang out in and do music in were on the west side of, west of Troost, I guess, if to say that is a dividing line in town. And so, and then with the marching band, so with the rental of that room required that we had to be out of the venue by 11 p.m. And I was like, how are we going to do that in a way that doesn't make people feel like they're being shoved out like cattle? Because I don't know about you, but when people turn the lights on after like a really cool show and they're like, get out, like that just really, it puts like a horrible feeling on the whole experience. Like that, like it really colors the whole experience. And you have, worked for months in rehearsals, figuring out budgets, figuring out sponsors, figuring out catering, figuring out costumes, figuring out musical arrangements and rehearsals, and putting this album together, and all the press releases and all the radio interviews. And so to have all of that experience built up to this 2 hours, and then to have all of that like kiboshed by a custodian turning on the lights and saying, get out, it's unacceptable to me. So I was like, how can we get everyone to leave the room immediately and have it feel awesome that they're doing it, like under their own volition? So as the closer of that song, Cantaloupe, that was the first time I sang it live. And it was, everyone had seen the album artwork by that point, and they knew that the name of the show and stuff like that. So everything built up to this song, everything built to this moment. And then as soon as there was the pedal drop at the end of that song, We Cantaloupe, then we hear the band playing out in the lobby, and I had like this scepter that had a Poseidon's trident, and I was in this like tulle wedding dress full of like dead flowers and wedding trinkets, and I go out to the lobby and listen to the band play, and then we go out to the street and we have a parade to the place where we were having the after party, the Mutual Musicians Foundation, down the street and around the corner. And so I parade everyone out of the room, and we follow the band down the block, and with me at the front, and an artist by the name of David Ford, who is really a part of the Mardi Gras community, which is like how. Anyway, there are lots of layers to this, but the things that you mentioned were actually not even necessarily a part of the original vision.
Okay,
but I am understanding the ripples of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it symbolically, what it meant to me, even as a solo artist, to be able to fill up a theater, a local, quote unquote, local artist in Kansas City, to fill up a theater on a weekend was something that I didn't think I could do. And I felt like that would be an accomplishment in and of itself, and, because as a musician in this town in particular, I always felt like if I wasn't a band, or if I wasn't presenting my brand as a band, then I would never be able to gather people. And I had to prove myself that I could do that, that I was enough, that my work was enough, that I didn't need a bigger headliner to get people into the room, So there's all of these kinds of things that I was like really wrestling with, and is even if I'm not playing jazz music on this street, on this block, am I still a musician? I remember, and I'm so sorry to be so tangential, but I remember a few months before that happened, my friend was playing at the Mutual Musicians Foundation, and he had left his cell phone at my house or something, and he ran to go do that gig. And so I met him at the venue, and it was before the venue had opened. He was doing a rehearsal beforehand, and there was a bouncer outside, and I had my friend's phone, and the bouncer says, "Are you a musician?" And I just like froze. Because I was like, I'm not playing here tonight because I'm not a jazz musician. I'm not. That's not the kind of music I make. So when he says, "Are you a musician?" is he asking me, "Do you play music? Are you a professional musician, or are you a jazz musician?" Like, and I just didn't know what to say. I was like, my friend's inside.
which yeah.
I
don't have a home. I don't have
right.
What box do I fit in? All those
right.
things. Yeah.
And so bearing, that in mind, it's like, okay, do I belong here? Am I a musician? Is my work credible? Is and all these kind of questions. Am I only credible in the folk community? Because that's been a huge part of my work, or like a part of my career is working with folk musicians and in the folk community, although I don't really necessarily fit there either. And so, yeah, this is it was a lot of these personal questions as well, and personal insecurities, and trying to see, in the world, do I fit here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, let's I really want to encourage people to not only listen to the album Cantaloupe, but also check out the music videos that you've done and produced, and the visual components. Your music is amazing. I think your lyrics are really, really good, but at the same time, you are so visual in all that you do, and there's so much meaning and layered to the visual components to what you do. It adds so much to it. I love it. So yeah. So why don't we go ahead and have you do Cantaloupe for us? Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
And then we'll, after your song, maybe we'll just we'll share a couple more thoughts and wrap our time up. But man, thanks for sharing all that. It's fun to hear your heart and your vision for what you want to do with this thing that's sacred and transcendent. This is Calvin Arsenia playing Cantaloupe. That's good.
It's a delicate thing. I take that toothy grin over just about any other thing. You can bet your bottom dollar that I've been looking for your ring. But what would your mom say? And how would your father feel without a crowd of witnesses? How will we know it was real? We cantaloupe, though wouldn't it be nice? But I need a photograph for our kids to laugh. We cantaloupe. Consider those who came before us. They gave up their lives so that you and I could proudly hold each other tight. You know I love frosting, and I know you love cake. So let's invite everyone to come and celebrate. Ooh, we cantaloupe. Though technically we could, but I've got nothing to prove. My choice is always you, but we cantaloupe. I could write out pages, worn out pages, but what good would that do? If you would just be patient, darling, patient. I'm already vowed to you. to you. We can't elope. As simple as that be. Where's the fun in it when we could flaunt a bit? We can't elope. We can't elope.
Hey, all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I love to read lyrics, and so like when I listen to any music, I have to love the music, but I'm always diving into the lyrics of things, and I love I love imagery and metaphors and things that are put into words, and yeah. I think it deep down, I'm like, man, couldn't I have just been a songwriter instead of a pastor, preacher, teacher? Anyway. Yeah, it's just so much more poetry to it. And then I used to memorize, like sermons from black pastors who were far more rhythmic and all that. And I tried to do it, but then it's just, it's like, that was part of like, okay, I got to be myself, Yeah. Because some things just didn't quite work. But any rate, it was wonderful to talk to you about your musical career. And I look forward to having many more conversations with you. I like my brain just pops off on all kinds of topics, not just music, but our backgrounds and our experiences and our journeys. It's been great to have you on our podcast. So thanks for joining us at Spirituality Adventures, and thanks for everybody. Thanks for everybody to tune in, and we'll see you next time at Spirituality Adventures.
Awesome.
Thanks again for tuning in. Remember to visit our support page at www.spiritualityadventures.com. If you like what you heard, be sure to share it and leave a comment. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Harvey Media Production.